don't think it can't happen to you. You don't want to walk my shoes. You don't want to walk in my shoes.
To go up in there and have to put on a smile in front of my baby, but on the inside, it hurts like hell.
Every day, I want to look him in the face and look him in the eyes. Let him know what he's done to our life.
I said, Mom, please don't tell me. I said, Mom, please don't tell me. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
We just hope that we can bring closure to this.
There are no words that can explain the pain that I feel inside and the emptiness.
Please. I'm sending help. Stay on the way.
They say I hate young black men, but the truth is quite opposite. I'm a big fan of young black men, and I'll tell you why. Do you know who kills the most young black men in this country? Young black men, and I'm a big fan of that. So keep buying your guns and killing each other just the way you are.
I first came to realize about black on black crime actually before I became a police officer. I mean, living in a neighborhood, growing up in the urban areas of Brownsville as well as Overtown, I was exposed to it.
The stuff you were exposed to, the stuff that you saw on a daily basis, we thought it was norm. And if you never have the experience to go outside of your neighborhood, you never actually learn what the other side lives like.
I was raised a part of my life in the Overtown area, but I was not allowed to go outside. And I was not allowed to participate in something as simple as street play or playing in the parking lot downstairs because there were no parks around. I think my parents saw early on the need to have certain control. Now, when I left that world, the reality of what was occurring in the communities, and especially the black community, hit me full force. Working homicide, I started early on looking at the numbers because every year all of our homicides are put on a board and you can see immediately the ethnicity and the race of the victims. And at some point I realized real early that there was an overwhelming amount of young black males on that board.
You find this unfortunate statistic that is consistent, that African Americans as a group are overrepresented pretty substantially in the arrest, conviction, and incarceration statistics. This was an article published in 2006. These researchers looked at crime statistics in 91 cities over 15 states. They included cities that had at least a 2,500 black population in order to have a decent baseline. They were looking at violent crime per 10,000 population. And they were able to get data on white on black crime, that is white offenders on black victims, white on white crime, black on white crime, and black on black crime. White on black crime is very low. It averages, according to the data, about 6 violent crimes per 10,000 population. So white on black crime is virtually insignificant. White on white crime bumps it up to 90. So white on white crime, there are 90 violent crimes per 10,000 population. But then when you go to the black population, which is only about 12 to 13% of the population in general, although it's a little bit higher in urban areas and in the South, black on white crime jumps up to 103.5 violent crimes per 10,000. And then the most shocking statistic is the black on black crime, which comes in at about 222 violent crimes per 10,000 population. So this sticks out like a sore thumb. For a long time, criminologists, policy analysts have been trying to figure out and explain why there is this massive epidemic.
It's an epidemic that's occurring not only in Miami-Dade County in the state of Florida, it's occurring nationwide.
America, I think, has tried to deal with black on black violence, and it's such a touchy issue because it involves the black community. It's very difficult to get a handle without getting into trouble. And I think the black community suffers from a kind of embarrassment that this is going on, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on show, and there's a lot of emphasis on protest marches, and there's a lot of sermons and ministers who get to be on television, but I don't see within the community a lot of grappling with the actual issues. Not that that's in any way easy to do.
One thing is very frustrating sometimes with the black on black crime. There's not enough outrage in the community sometimes.
The outrage is incredible when it comes to a police officer shooting another black person. And that police officer being white, being Spanish. But when a black young man shoots another black young man, there's no outrage. Of course we care why that officer shot our loved one. But our priority is to care why are we shooting each other.
I call and get homicide stats every month. And for the month of March, there were 9 black-on-black homicides throughout the county, as opposed to the 7 police shootings that they were talking about bringing Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson in over a 7-month period. 7 police shootings in a 7-month period. How in the name of the good Lord can you compare 7 police shootings in a 7-month period against 9 black-on-black shootings in less than 30 days? They're not compatible. We need to be consistent in what we do. That goes for the police and the community.
We should be asking ourselves, why is it that we accept the fact that nobody, male or female, can walk down the street after dark? You know, you've got to be in a posse with guns, and this gang controls this kind of territory. Why is that okay? We should set a standard, and we should work to live up to it.
I've been a city Miami detective for 23 years. I've worked narcotics, currently working homicides. I can tell you from what I know and from what I deal with, the trends have definitely changed out on the street. You see a younger and younger kids out on the street, 13, 14, actually committing homicides with no remorse, with no regrets.
Some of these guys, they've known each other for a long time, grew up in school together, but due to the fact of a spur of the moment over a girl, this guy may be dating somebody that you used to date, and all of a sudden, let me pick up this gun and go ahead and shoot him. Just off of this, the least little thing, it's like you got that anger going on.
Actually, it's sad. Some of them think it's like for bragging rights. You know, it's like I got stripes now.
Oh, okay. You go back into your neighborhood as a black child, 14, you just did an armed robbery. You're a hero.
And that's the honest truth. You know, you're talking to somebody that sees this every day. I mean, with young kids just losing their lives and being put on a t-shirt, you know, and somehow these kids today think that it's cool to know somebody that's been killed or shot and they're on a t-shirt. It seems like these kids are being raised without any guidance. And it's really sad to see that these kids out there are the generation that's coming up.
In my generation in the 70s, I noticed this cultural change. And prior to my generation, I was watching with my parents' generation. If they got into a fight, it was a lot of fist fights. But in my generation, especially when I got into the high school, you had the fist fights, but then the weapons started to come into play. First, the knives, and then the weapon of choice was the guns. As each generation comes, the generation behind me, which would be my kids, that would be the weapon of choice. You don't hear the knives anymore. Now you hear, every time you look, the guns. You don't hear the fist fights anymore. Now every time, after a quick fist fight that's made started, the guy's hollering out, I gotta go get something, and they're running to go get a gun. And that's the thing now. You don't have the fist fights anymore, nothing but gunplay.
If those guys were working or in school or all the things that they should be doing in their age group, they would not be killing each other. And I think that men in particular feel emasculated and humiliated and useless when they're not doing something constructive with their lives, and especially when they have moms and sisters and children that they're not standing up for. So all these young aimless men with drugs and access to guns, I think it's impossible that they would not be killing each other.
You think you're seeing something now? You haven't seen nothing yet. As each generation comes up, unless you do something, the crimes are going to be more heinous. It's going to get worse. And don't cry about it, because the family's allowing this to happen. And every time I look, I hear people raising saying about the guns and saying we need to take the assault weapons off the street. That's a joke. Not the assault weapons. It takes a person to actually pull that trigger. Yeah, I got my own weapon. I can lay that weapon on the table and that weapon won't do anything to me. It won't jump up and shoot me. It takes a person to actually pull the trigger off of that. You go out there and say, okay, fast cars are killing up people. So what you gonna say then? Okay, we gotta get rid of fast cars? It takes a person to do that. You're throwing blame everywhere else instead of where it needs to be at the individuals.
Those who want black people dead or don't like black people, I can imagine them sitting back now and saying, well, our goal is being achieved and we're not even doing anything.
When I first started working homicide a million years ago, one of the things that I was taught from the old timers that were on then was, if the kid does something wrong, you go talk to the parents. And once upon a time, when you went and talked to the parents, that kid would be handed over to you. And the parents would be the ones at the core that dealt with that kid, and in terms of assisting the police. The trend is changed, and we no longer do that. Now we have parents that will lie for their kids. We have parents that will cover for their kids. We have parents that will protect their kids by any means.
This correlated with the breakdown of the families. Prior to my generation, with the mothers and fathers, it was shameful for a daughter to get pregnant and try to raise a kid by themselves. And the daughter had to get married. In my generation, what ended up happening, you had 15, 16-year-olds having kids. And when you got kids having kids, there's the problem. If you're having a baby at 15 or 16, how can you teach that kid as they're growing up any values when you're doing something like that?
A child leading a child is only going to lead to what that child knows. And if a child knows violence, he's going to lead his child to violence. If there's no one telling me that this is right and this is wrong, but my peers are saying the wrong thing is right and the right thing is wrong, ultimately, I'm going to do what my peers say, because no one else is telling me opposite. And what that does is it locks down the thinking process. So to that child, they're only doing what's right to them.
One of the major theories with regard to how persons are bonded to conventional society is the social control theory by sociologist Travis Hershey, who made the argument that persons are generally bad. They generally will go for whatever they can get away with unless there are obstacles in their way to block them, to try to steer them toward conformity. And those controls that are in place start with everyday life, especially friends, family, and folks who can supervise you on a daily basis. That's why there's this idea that parents play an important role of supervising and monitoring their kids, and if they're absent, you have less opportunity to teach them right from wrong and so forth, and they don't develop a proper conscience, and they're left to their own devices, and if they reach that point, they're likely to be involved in a lot of first delinquency and then criminality.
Your family structure plays a major role in how you come up, and I'll say that until the end of my time.
The father's not being a part of the family. They're not being involved. And that's a major problem within the black culture. In the late 80s to early 90s, I took my own independent survey, and I've arrested hundreds of individuals. I was a road officer for 14 years, and as I was arresting individuals, I wasn't arresting individuals in their 30s and 40s. I saw an increase of individuals 13, 14, no higher than the age of 25. And I did my own survey. And my own survey, I would ask every person that I arrested, is your mother and father both in your life? And there was only 2 out of all those individuals that I arrested that told me that they had both their mothers and fathers. And that's shocking.
He was looking for the source of the problem and solutions in the perfectly right place, and he found it. And finding only 2 suspects in 8 years who lived in a nuclear family, that encapsulates the entire problem.
There is a correlation between so-called broken homes. Well, let's say single-headed households. Female-headed households in particular are pretty much correlated with worse child outcomes in terms of educational attainment, cognitive development, higher rates of juvenile delinquency. This perpetuates the feeling that something's wrong in the culture because there is not as much of emphasis placed on marriage and family, a lot of abandonment and so forth.
There's a lot of fathers make the baby today and go back to their normal tomorrow.
People talk about the irresponsibility of the black fathers, and that tends to come from outside the community. Within the community, there seems to be this belief that black men are not present in their children's lives because black women won't let them be. That's insulting, and it's not true. Certainly, there are going to be some women who are just going to dog you right out of your kids' lives, and you're trying your best to be a good dad. There are going to be some of those women. But I think there are far more black mothers who would welcome the addition of the father to the home. Now, there's also a group of women who know that their children should not be around their father, crackheads or that sort of thing. Now, should she have had his child? No, but she did. And she's being a good mother by not letting that guy be involved. The majority of women, I think, would want the man to be active, if only because it gives them a break. They can go to have some alone time.
Every time there was dinner time, you had the mother and dad and the kids sitting at the dinner table. You don't see that right now. It's hard for people to do. And I see where the problem is, because you got mostly now single parents, and they're hustling to go ahead on and take care of work and everything. And they don't have the time to spend to sit down at the dinner table to raise the kid properly or teach the kid any values.
Sitting down together for a family dinner is part of the whole complex of the old village community, where parents had better control of their kids because kids relied on their parents to get food. But with the advent of fast food and so forth, and the advent of transportation like the automobile culture starting in the 1950s, kids are more independent and more off on their own, and with less supervision, there's going to be an opportunity for kids to get into trouble.
In my family, before my father passed, there was always one parent at home with us all the time. It was rare that we looked at a babysitter. My dad worked the night shift, my mother would work the day shift.
If you have both parents working, a kid comes home from school, and there's no one there to tell that kid what to do, the kid's gonna watch TV, the kid's gonna do whatever. The kid's not going to stick to whatever is supposed to be going on, as opposed to a household where you have a dad at work, a mom at home, the kid comes home, there's an adult figure there in the house, and there's structure.
This child is left to grow up on their own. And when they're left to grow up on their own, they're going to be subject to what's happening around them. If I see violence, and I see it today, and I see it tomorrow, wow, violence is the new trend. A wise man once said before, charity begins at home.
Charity begins at home. And what that means is that kids have to be raised in a structured environment. They have to be told when it's time to go to bed, when it's time to turn off the television, when it's time to do homework.
I mean, without the structure, they're just out there. I mean, sometimes you see kids that are 14, 15, out on the street at 12, 1 o'clock at night. There's nothing good going on at 12 o'clock at night for a juvenile on the street at that time of night.
If you're not getting anything at home, you're only going to get what's outside of the home. And I can almost bet 99.9% of the time, what you're getting outside of the home, if it's not by a person who wants to see you achieve, then it's gonna be bad.
It's not until they actually get in jail or into a correctional facility where they start to learn how to actually live a structured life.
Subsequently, people are learning lessons at the age of 25 and 30 that they should have learned when they were 5, 6, and 7 when they were coming up, because parents are not sitting down teaching them those lessons. Parents are trying to be nice guys. Be prepared for what you get, because when you get what you get, don't cry, because you caused that.
I blame a lot of it on the parents. I mean, I may be stepping overboard to say that, but I'm a parent, and I had a son that was a thug. I turned in guns 3 separate times to my son, and that's my thing that right now with the parents. Your son live in your house, he's not working, he has money all the time. Check on what he's doing. Well, I did that for my son, and my son got 10 years in state prison. He earned every day there. I told him, you earn your way there, and you earn it out. When he got out, he came to my house as a probation officer. I say, son, you have a room to stay here, but you must follow my guidelines.
What I see is people not accepting consequences for their actions. Because if they have never brought up with consequences, how can you expect them to think that there's consequences? And that's what's happening. My parents told me, okay, you mess up one time. The first time, we'll come get you. After that, you're on your own. And that thought process was, okay, I cannot make a mistake. I'm not going out there to go ahead and make a mistake. So people are not giving those kids those consequences. When you don't have any consequences, you have chaos.
As an inner city pastor, I've come across a lot of young black African American males in the community, most of whom have a different outlook on life based upon their surroundings and basically how they grew up. On a day-to-day basis, they will come to me and say, well, I don't think you quite understand my situations or my problems. I then have to stop them and say, listen, I really do understand. Because although I am a pastor or a younger clergyman, I've been through some of the same situations you've been through. Mainly being a inner city youth who grew up in a community of Miami known as the Pork and Bean Projects. And